That black, sunken, leathery patch spreading across the bottom of your tomatoes is not a disease, and no spray will stop it. It's a watering problem, and once you fix the watering, it stops for good. If straight, honest growing advice is what you've been looking for, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps. So picture what you're standing over. A firm tomato, still hard, still ripening, hanging on a plant that looks perfectly well. The leaves above it are green, the trusses are green, everything up top says healthy. But turn that fruit over in your hand, and there it is. A dark, sunken patch creeping up from the bottom end, leathery to the touch, almost like old dried leather pulled tight over the fruit. Not soft rot, not mush. A flat, hard, blackened scar. And it's only on the bottom. And I know exactly what runs through your head when you see it. Because it ran through mine for years. Blight. Some disease moving through the plant, about to take the lot. You start eyeing the fungicide on the shelf. Maybe you've already bought one. Maybe you've already sprayed, twice, and stood there a week later watching the next tomatoes come up with the very same black bottom. Same plant. Same result. Nothing changed. If you've already reached for a fungicide over these black bottoms, you are not alone. And I promise you it did nothing, because there is no fungus to kill. That's the part I need you to hear. This is not a fungus. The fungicide is wasted money, plain and simple, because there is nothing there for it to kill. You cannot spray this away. Every bottle you buy for it goes down the drain. Not because it's a bad product, but because it's the wrong tool for a problem that has nothing to do with disease. You could empty the whole thing onto that plant, and the next fruit would still rot at the bottom. So what is it then? It has a name. Gardeners have been calling it the same thing for generations. Blossom end rot. That black, sunken bottom is the blossom end of the fruit. The very tip, furthest from the stem, quietly collapsing. And the reason it collapses comes down to one thing the fruit isn't getting enough of: calcium. Now here's where it gets strange, and this is the bit that trips everyone up. The fruit is starving for calcium, genuinely starving, right at that growing tip. And yet the plant above it is green, strong, lush, not a yellow leaf in sight. Nothing about that plant looks short of anything. So the calcium isn't simply missing. Something is stopping it from arriving where it's needed, and the reason has almost nothing to do with what's actually in your soil. Follow the water, because that is the one road calcium can travel. A tomato plant can't shove calcium around freely the way it moves sugars and nitrogen wherever it likes. Calcium travels only dissolved in water pulled up from the roots. It rides that stream, and it gets off wherever the water is flowing strongest. Now think about a growing tomato. Every day those cells are dividing and swelling, and to build the wall around each one, the plant needs calcium. Calcium builds the cell walls of the fruit, brick by brick. The fastest growing part of the whole tomato is the tip, the blossom end, the very bottom that goes black. That tip is working hardest, so it needs the steadiest delivery of all. And here's the cruel part. It's also the furthest point from the roots, the last stop on the whole line. So picture the soil going bone dry, then a heavy soak, then bone dry again. That swing is the killer. When the ground dries out, the water stops moving and the calcium stops with it. When you flood it, the plant races that water up to its thirsty leaves, not to one small green fruit. The steady stream, the tip, depends on stutters and breaks. And when the calcium doesn't arrive, the cells right at the bottom have nothing to build with, so they collapse. Cut one of those tomatoes open, and you can see it plainly. The tissue at the tip gone dry and brown and caved in. That is the black, sunken, leathery patch, sitting on an otherwise firm, healthy tomato. It isn't rot eating in from outside. It's the fruit starving from the inside, at the one point that needed feeding most. Here's the part nobody selling you a bottle wants to say out loud. It is almost never a shortage in your soil. Most garden soil already has plenty of calcium sitting right there. So when you crush a bag of eggshells over the bed, or reach for one of those calcium sprays in a panic, you usually get nothing back, because the problem was never supply. It's delivery. And it goes deeper than that. Eggshells take months, often years, to break down into anything a root can actually use. They are not feeding this year's fruit, no matter how finely you crush them. And a spray misted onto the leaves barely reaches the fruit at all, because calcium doesn't shuttle back down out of a leaf once it's up there. You're pouring good effort into the wrong end of the plant. Tell me in the comments which crop keeps letting you down this year. And if this is finally making sense, subscribe and stay with me. So let it land. The calcium is already in the ground. The plant is perfectly capable of using it. The only thing broken is the plumbing between the two. The water that should be carrying it up in a steady, even stream. Fix the water, and you fix the fruit. Nothing you sprinkle around the base, nothing you spray on the leaves, changes that. Which leaves exactly one question. If it's the watering and nothing else, what does steady watering actually look like? How deep, how often, and how to stop that soil swinging dry, then flooded ever again? Here is exactly what it looks like at the bed. You water deeply, and you water less often. Not a little splash around the stem every evening, which is what most people do, and which is the very thing that keeps the soil swinging bone dry to soaked and back again. You give it a proper soak, enough that the water sinks right down and reaches the deep roots, not just the crust on top. Then you leave it. You let the top settle and dry a touch before you go back and soak it deep again. That is the whole rhythm. Deep, then wait, then deep again. And here is the goal, in one line. Keep the soil evenly moist all the time. Never bone dry, never flooded. When you hold that middle, the water is always there for the roots to pull up, and the calcium rides up, dissolved in that water, steady, right into the fast-growing tip of every fruit. The flow stops stuttering. The walls of the fruit get built the way they should. That black, sunken patch never gets its foot in the door. Now, containers. If you grow in pots or grow bags, pay close attention, because they dry out fastest and they get blossom end rot worst of anything. A pot has a tiny reservoir of soil and the sun cooks it from every side. In real summer heat, that means a deep water every single day, sometimes morning and evening. Miss a day, let it go bone dry, and you have handed it the exact swing that ruins the bottoms. Containers do not forgive you. They need the most consistent hand you have got. Then mulch. Honestly, mulch is half the battle won on its own. A good layer of straw or compost or grass clippings spread over the root zone around the stem. What it does is simple. It stops the sun and wind ripping the moisture straight out of the top of the soil, so the ground underneath stays even between your soakings. It buffers the swing for you. You water less. The roots stay steady, and you have taken the biggest cause of this whole problem and quietly switched it off. Now the honest part, because I am not going to sell you a miracle. The tomatoes already marked with that black leathery bottom will not heal. That fruit is done. The cells collapsed, and they are not coming back. So go along the plant and pick those off. Snap them clean from the truss, so your plant stops pouring energy into feeding fruit that is already ruined. Get rid of them. Let the plant put everything into what is coming next. And this is where it pays you back. Once the moisture holds steady, the next trusses coming up behind set clean. Full, firm, perfect green bottoms, no black patch anywhere on them. You will see it happen on the plant itself. Same soil, same plant, same everything. The only thing that changed was the water. That is your proof, right there in your hand. It was the watering, not blight, all along. Do this on your next watering, and the truss after this one comes clean. That is the whole trick. It costs you nothing but a watering can and a habit. No chemicals, no fungicide, no guesswork. Just steady water and a bit of mulch. And that is the difference between a tray of ruined bottoms in the bin and baskets of firm, heavy tomatoes filling up right through the season. Go and steady that water. Your next truss is waiting.